Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Talking Point. My name is Fahraaz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. The big news dominating South Africa this week has been the deaths of the South African National Defence Force soldiers who are currently fighting in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They're trying to quell a rebellion that is called the M23, which has been backed by Rwanda. So far, the death toll of South African soldiers has reached a number of 13. Various questions have been asked as to whether should SANDF soldiers pull out, should they remain as part of the African Union peacekeeping force, and the questions surrounding whether the SANDF is capable of going into war-torn areas and really protecting whatever it is that they are protecting in terms of the civilian life there, and of course taking on these militia groups. Joining me now to open the show, and he's afforded at this time, I'd like to welcome the South African National Defence Force Head of Communications, Siphiwe Dlamini. Mr. Dlamini, thank you so much for joining us on Talking Point on Hilaal TV.
Thank you very much for having me on Hilaal TV, and it's a pleasure to be on your show, and good evening to your viewers and listeners.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Mr. Dlamini, on another broadcast on another television station, a security analyst said that this is a war that the South African National Defence Force should not have gotten involved in. There's also, talks that the army is probably out of its depth in taking on these M23 rebels. How do you respond to that?
Well, people have different opinions and different understanding of the situation on the ground. Look, South Africa, first and foremost, is part of the global community. And one of our foreign policy objective is to contribute to peace and stability in the region, that is in the Southern African region. Is to contribute to peace and stability on the continent and beyond the continent, in whichever form that we are able to contribute. And in this case, you would recall that when President Mandela was inaugurated as the first president of a democratic South Africa, one of the projects, if I may call it, was to engage the people of the Congo, DRC, to try and bring peace and stability in that region. We hosted a number of the political parties and groups from the DRC, which spent a lot of time in Sun City. That's why we came out with the Sun City Accord, which brought together all parties under one roof, and there were elections, and everybody was happy with that outcome. So our responsibility is to ensure that our African brotherhood and sisterhood is taken forward by being part and parcel of contributing to try and resolve the peace and stability, to create an economic prosperity in the region.
Mr. Dlamini, one would argue that facing an M23 rebellion group, which is, it seems that they are very sophisticated, and it seems as if the weaponry that they are using is really of a high tech. And the question a lot of people have been asking, and of course that's the reason why we have you here, is the current defense force able to handle what is being dished out to them by this M23 rebellion group, given that they are on a rampage? The city of Goma is looking slowly but surely, if not, is currently in the hands of this rebellion group. So does the SANDF have this real capability of taking on a group that just seems to be quite superior in quite a lot of ways?
Well, until you're on the ground, you would know what is the state of play there. But I'll answer you in two ways.
Sure.
The first being South Africa. I've just painted you a short picture at the political level. We have been in peacekeeping missions in that particular region and country. Our first mission was in Burundi, where we brought total peace in Burundi, when nobody, including the United Nations, entered there. And President Mandela is the first one who deployed us, and we had no experience in peacekeeping. We just formed a new National Defense Force,
Sure.
but the president took it upon himself to say there must be something that must be done in Burundi. And since the time in Burundi we were there to date, peace has prevailed. And that experience began there as peacekeeping contributing country. And to date, we've been in several peacekeeping missions in Africa and beyond in various forms, where we've provided advisors, we've provided electoral officers, we've provided a range of things to those countries to ensure that there's peace prevails.
Sure.
In the DRC in particular, we are one of the largest troop contributing countries under the United Nations. And we've been there for close to 20 years now. And that on its own, the experience that has been gained over this period of time is immense. And I'm not even exaggerating here. In many instances where we have been, everybody calls on South Africa to be part and parcel of the peace processes, because we are seen as a very neutral country. And therefore, our troops in that space of time have gained immense experience, skills, and other what they've gained. So I am more than confident that our troops have that experience. The second part of your question comes to the resources. Indeed, these missions are not solely driven by South Africa. They are a multinational mission, and when you are in a multinational mission, you are one of those that are contributing to that mission, be it by military personnel, which is boots on the ground, be it by resources. It could be financial resources, it could be equipment, it could be any other kind of contribution that you're making. In this case, South Africa has contributed the military personnel and together with our equipment. Other countries in SADC region now have also contributed in a manner that was expected and what they pledged. Where I would agree with you is that enough? And my answer would like, as the Defense Force, to have had more than what we have at the present moment.
Well, after the break, Mr. Dlamini, we are going to talk on obviously budgets, resourcing, and whether obviously the SANDF is looking to National Treasury to help bolster the army. After the break, I'll continue my conversation with Siphiwe Dlamini from the South African National Defence Force. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm still in conversation with Siphiwe Dlamini from the South African National Defence Force. He serves as the head of communication. Thank you so much for staying with us, Mr. Dlamini. I want to touch on budget issues, and this was, of course, raised by Deputy Minister General Bantu Holomisa, where he said that, look, there has to be much more resources that are given towards the South African National Defence Force. How dire is the situation, Mr. Dlamini, in terms of needing to go to National Treasury and say, well, this is what we need if we are to go ahead and bolster the SANDF?
Look, there must be a historical background to this situation which we find ourselves in. Being that over the years, the South African National Defence Force budget has been de-escalating instead of escalating. If one looks at the 20-year period, you can see the scale at which we were in 1994 and the scale in which we were in 2014 and the scale in which we are in now in 2024, 25. There's been a deep decrease of the budget. And we've raised this thing with we've raised this thing with government as a whole, and there's been discussions amongst ourselves internally as to how best we can present our case to government. And externally, there's also internally we've been also painting different scenarios. If you remember, we embarked in 2015, 2014, 2015. We embarked on a defense review, which is a policy document as to how the South African National Defence Force as a government military organ should look like and how it should be resourced, it should compose of, the composition of people, the composition of each services and divisions, how the whole structure should look, and what the focus should be. Now, the 2015 Defence Review, which was approved by national legislature, parliament, and was also approved by the cabinet then, and that is why it became a policy, a military or defense policy of South Africa. Since then, when the approval was done, unfortunately, it was not resourced. And therefore, that on its own made the operations of the defense force, managing of the defense force, very difficult, because we had looked towards the defense review to be resourced, and then we take a trajectory that moves up the ladder. However, that was not to be. Meanwhile, again, our responsibilities were increasing. And in the increasing of our responsibilities, the budget support those responsibilities also affected the resources, because there was nothing coming through. But in recent times, we have, as I said, engaged quite intensively amongst ourselves internally and government. We've had engagements with the National Treasury, where we knuckled down between ourselves and looked at all the options that are available. And we are alive to the fact that the economy has not been doing well. We have had COVID, which has had an impact on the entire world, let alone us in the South who are poorer, were most affected. And we are alive to that. The government has a number of other responsibilities. But we still bring forth to government that the Defence Force is in dire need for more resources to make sure that it does not lose the capacity that is left, that it has. Remember, the Defence Force is a 20-year program if you want to rejuvenate it.
Yeah. You're talking about the rejuvenation, Mr. Dlamini, of course, nobody would have wanted this to happen. The fact that there are soldiers that have died being on duty for the South African National Defence Force, would this be enough? And I know it's obviously taken the deaths of soldiers, which is, like I said, something I think both you and I and the millions of South Africans are regretting right now. But has this taken, or is this the wake-up call that government needs to say, well, maybe there needs to be a review of the budgetary challenges that the SANDF has had?
No. This discussion has been going on for quite a while, and this incident is but an incident that has just happened outside what has been going on. Because, as I say, in the past 2 years, we've actually been intensely engaging government, even up to the highest office, where there were clear instructions on what needs to happen. We need to come back with certain programs and show what is it that we can do with what we have, and what is it that we need, what we have to be augmented with. So those analysis and the discussions and all other entities of the department have come together. We have extended this discussion together with the National Treasury to look at the budgeting process, how the Defence Force, the National Defence Force should be budgeted, and all those processes are at play right now, and government, I must be upfront, has given us a very good and positive hearing, and we are doing our best to ensure that we meet their requirements.
Mr. Dlamini, discussions, and of course, this would involve the SANDF, this would involve, of course, the national troops of the DRC under the presidency of Felix Tshisekedi. Is there ongoing truce talks that are happening with this M23 rebel group, given that they are making more advances in towards cities like Goma and could do so in the coming days or even weeks? Is South Africa, from a governmental perspective, and I know the SANDF would work closely with portfolios closely aligned to that. I'm specifically talking on international relations to try and find some sort of truce to end the fighting within that area.
Look, again, without getting into politics, as a military organization, we always shy away from getting too much into politics. But look, the situation that we are faced with now, as we speak, is that the international organizations like United Nations, your East African Community, the Great Lakes region, and of course SADC are sitting around the table, deliberating on what is happening in the DRC right now, particularly in the eastern DRC, the province of North Kivu, where our troops are based and where the whole fighting is taking place. As for ourselves, as the National Defense Force, we were there as per the mandate of the SADC community, which took a decision in 2023 December that we need to help the government of the Congo to try and bring peace into that region in particular. And together with the United Nations, because we also have troops in the United Nations, we are also there. Again, also work towards peace from a different level outside politics. But at the end of the day, everybody knows that it's negotiations and negotiations and negotiations that will finally bring peace. And that is why these organizations I've mentioned are locked in their boardrooms discussing the way forward. And President Ruto of Kenya made an announcement yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, that he will be calling a summit of the Great Lakes region, which includes the East African countries in the main, to again look at how best this whole situation can be resolved.
Mr. Dlamini, thank you so much for joining us here on Talking Point on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, and it was a great pleasure to have us on your show. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's Siphiwe Dlamini, Head of Communications at the South African National Defence Force. After the break, I'm going to be hoping to connect to General Maumelo Matau. Of course, he's a former SANDF general. Do stay tuned.